Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Your time grows increasingly more valuable by the day as we approach 0 hour, so I'm not going to waste it. An overview of what we're going to talk about today includes the following: an article from The Guardian in which they interview a government insider who suggests that the West is preparing ways to manage the panic of its population, as opposed to how they can prepare their population with all the provisions and the security and safety and training that they might need to endure such a nuclear scenario. Instead, governments are preparing to deal with the unrest and the socio-economic fallout. A very telling article indeed. We're also going to talk about the mass evacuations that are underway. Many countries, most of them allied with Russia, are advising their populations to get out of Ukraine now. Something big is coming. Possibly some kind of shock and awe campaign, but we do not know yet. Definitely some sort of major offensive is being prepared on the border of Belarus and Ukraine, as well as throughout the Eastern Front. We also have Moscow, who's building bomb shelters in certain places. We're going to talk about an article that was released by a Lithuanian news agency about that. We're also going to talk about urgent calls for radiation pills and survival training for every family, as Britain is woefully unprepared for nuclear war. This is from the mostly reprehensible and very biased news agency, The Sun, so take it with a grain of salt. We're also going to talk about Leon Panetta, who is the former Secretary of Defense. He suggests that we are at about 20 to 25% likely to see a nuclear incident. That's pretty damn high, up from 1 to 5% earlier in the year. We have Russia deploying military satellites. We have this situation unfolding in China, where the Biden administration has said that basically, if you're working in the Chinese chip industry, you need to resign immediately or else you're going to lose their citizenship. And this has, according to this Jordan Schneider guy, this is circulating, this is trending right now, it's going to paralyze the Chinese chip industry, which may well incentivize the Chinese to invade Taiwan sooner than later. At least that's the reasoning. We're also going to share with you a few maps that you might want to consider the probability and survivability of various locations around the United States and North America, including fallout shelters. We're also going to talk about wild and erratic weather patterns that are caused by a wavier jet stream, which is going to see above normal temperatures and below normal temperatures concurrently on the North American continent, and that is due to the rapid rate in which the Arctic is heating and causing the complete breakdown of the jet stream, meaning it's going to be a wild, wild winter in some parts, and we're likely going to have record temperatures in others. So let's just break it all down. Let's jump right into the first story here. So this is important to me because recall, we've been saying that if a bomb was dropped in Ukraine, one of the biggest things that the governments of the world are going to have to contest with are people freaking out. Because you know how it goes, right? People don't prepare, they don't prepare. Then when something happens, everybody freaks out because they're unprepared. As preppers, we're prepared, so we stay home and we just watch it all unfold, right? But the West, according to this article, Western officials are engaged in prudent planning, not just haphazard planning, but prudent planning behind the scenes to prevent chaos and panic in their home countries in the event Russia was to detonate a nuclear bomb. They understand the potential for this to cause great amounts of socioeconomic destabilization. We're talking about bank runs. We're talking about collapsing markets. We're talking about runs on the stores, hoarding, panic buying, possibly even looting. So I think that the Emergency Powers Act that we've seen implemented earlier in the year here in Canada will likely ultimately have been a dry run for that. When that event finally happens, it's going to be a way for the government to quickly jump into action and quell any sort of civil unrest that might result from people panicking. And of course, all of those measures which were put into place during the COVID lockdowns will likely be replicated in some way, because now we're all trained to stand outside, stand 6 feet apart, a limited amount of people in the stores. So because you have a whole generation now who's already went through that, people are going to acquiesce to that sort of governance much easier. Okay, so I think what this tells us is that the government right now does not have the resources, or at least I shouldn't say that, it's not their priority to provide everybody with a bunker or encourage them to get the provisions that they would need to lay low for an extended period of time. The best they're going to offer us is some cheesy 3-word tagline like "Get inside, stay inside, STFU, and stay tuned" type thing. You know, that stop, drop, and roll. That's the equivalent. Duck and cover. Nothing has changed in 60 years since the height of the Cold War. The government regards its citizens in the very same way. They will save themselves while trying to minimize panic amongst the population, and maybe they'll put 300 million aside to deal with the acute radiation sickness that ensues, but not much more than that, because of course we have to continuously send billions and billions of dollars to this war for some reason that most people just simply have no clue as to why that's happening, but they're doing it, and they're going to keep on doing it. So according to this insider who wants to remain anonymous, this is the government strategy. They're going to prepare to put us all on lockdown and, close the stock markets and stop the bank runs, freeze accounts, probably also try to undermine any grassroots movement that emerges to try to protest this whole nuclear escalation. That's coming too. We also have a situation developing in Ukraine which is very tense because you have China, Egypt, Serbia, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, pretty much all the stands, okay? They're all telling their people they need to get out of Kiev immediately. Now, the Chechens are getting ready to mobilize. As you can see here, they are getting ready. They're sending numerous battalions to Ukraine. Of course, they are already there. Ramzan Kadyrov, now third in command of the Russian military, is sending some of his best troops to that fight. We also have the Belarusians who are starting to see a lot of activity in their country. Train loads of troops are pouring in. You have MiG-31s that are capable of shooting nuclear missiles being deployed to Belarus. You have Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles being deployed there. There are massive troop deployments and contingents preparing to do some sort of offensive. And is it going to be a winter offensive? Is this just going to be a shock and awe type thing where they just bombard the place and light it up with precision-guided missiles? We don't know, but we know that something big is coming. The Chinese, I think through a WeChat or something like that, some social media, released this, which of course I cannot read. Apparently the translation is something to the effect of all foreign nationals need to get out of Ukraine immediately because something big is coming. So you can expect in the coming days and weeks ahead, chaos to ensue. Moscow is also building bomb shelters, apparently. So this is from a Lithuanian news agency, and they're saying that in the underground parking lots of the capital of Russia, beds, heaters, and first aid kits are being equipped. They plan to use these as bomb shelters. Now recall, I just said this a few weeks ago that, a great place to, if you really had nowhere else to go, would be to go into one of these underground parkades, because the buildings are built to be very strong because they have to carry the weight of several vehicles, all of which weigh several thousand pounds. They're usually concrete reinforced steel. There's usually no windows down there. They're subterranean, so they're fully buried under the ground. They would be a great place to ride it out. So if you don't have your own bunker, if you don't have access to a subway system or some other type of subterranean fallout shelter, then of course that might be an option. And these places could well be like Mad Max fortification zones if and when it all happens, unless they of course are commandeered by the municipalities, which I'm sure they will. I'm sure, any sort of a fallout shelter management system would look at those as being viable ways of protecting a certain amount of people, probably VIPs, i.e. not you and me. Anyways, Muscovites were urged to free the parking lot from cars and personal belongings by October 18th, since it will be brought in accordance with the direct purpose of the Civil Defense Facility. Now, this is translated from Lithuanian, I believe, so it's not a perfect translation. The announcement states that the corresponding decision was made on October 11th. Now, this doesn't mean that something is going to happen by October 18th. It just means that these places need to be properly outfitted by that time. It doesn't mean that, they're all being evacuated of vehicles and they're preparing for a major incident to happen. I guess it just means they're taking stock, surveying, doing inventory, whatever, to make sure that they're all up to speed. Since the beginning of the war, they say the Sochi City Department has twice sent letters to the heads of management companies regarding the readiness of protective structures of civil defense and anti-radiation shelters. Now, moving over to the UK. Apparently, they're not that prepared there. Prepare for doomsday. This is from the news agency The Sun, if you want to call it news. Incredibly biased news. It is what it is. Urgent calls for radiation pills and survival training for every family as Britain is woefully unprepared for nuclear war. Yes, if you live in Britain, if it breaks out, I regret to inform you, you're probably screwed, to be brutally honest, because you definitely will be taking a lot of yield. And you'll probably get a Poseidon missile as well. That's not to say that it's a hopeless situation by any stretch of the means, but it just means that there is really not a lot in place for the public there. As far as I know, a lot of the Cold War shelters have been auctioned off by the government long ago, according to this article. And most of the people there are sitting ducks. So British Army veterans and academics on disaster response are warning that the UK is unprepared and that they need to get ready for not just nuclear warfare, but hybrid warfare. That is things like cyber attack, attacks on critical infrastructure, or even conventional strikes. So the article just talks about, how unprepared the UK population is, and hopefully encourages some people there to start taking the threats more seriously when you have the leader of the UK military saying that they need to prepare to fight the Russians and making it seem like that is inevitable, then obviously that entails World War III and people should be preparing to the best of their capability. Leon Panetta has suggested that the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine, the possibility of that has increased from 1 to 5% at the start of the war to 20 to 25% today. And what he suggests might happen if this 20 to 25% option happens is that the retaliation, of course, will have to come from NATO, because NATO cannot sit idly by and do nothing. Any attack will demand a firm response from NATO, and of course, that firm response will likely be what triggers a even greater nuclear escalation. All the more reason to be prepared. Russia has deployed a new military satellite. They're not saying what the capabilities of this thing are. All we know is that it has been deployed just yesterday. I think they fired off another satellite a few days ago. That one is for navigational purposes, possibly related to GLONASS, which is like GPS. But this one is more secretive. So could this be another satellite killer satellite? We know that space warfare is going to be a big part of World War III. And, Trump was scoffed at for Space Force, but it's starting to make a lot of sense. Recall that how this whole thing kicked off last year was when Russia shot one of its own satellites. Many people thought that could create some sort of chain reaction, which could put all of the satellites of the planet in jeopardy due to what is the event called? It starts with a K. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's when one satellite knocks into another satellite, and that continuously generates greater debris field, which can potentially just create all this space junk, and I can't remember what it's called. Something starts with a K. Anyways, so that's not good. So we have escalation in space as well. We also have this story that I just caught wind of. Apparently, this guy, Jordan Schneider, is some sort of political tech analyst or something like that. He says the U.S. government's new export controls are wreaking havoc on China's chip industry. New rules around U.S. persons are driving industry-wide decapitation. So if you didn't know, there was an economic war being waged right now between the Chinese and the United States, and some people are thinking that this is going to expedite the China-Taiwan conflict. To put it simply, Biden has forced all Americans working in China to pick between quitting their jobs and losing American citizenship. I don't even know if that's legal, but apparently it might be. Every American executive and engineer working in China's semiconductor manufacturing industry resigned yesterday, paralyzing Chinese manufacturing overnight. Although American semiconductor exporters have had to apply for licenses during the Trump years, licenses were approved within a month. And so, yeah, he's saying that this is annihilating the Chinese semiconductor manufacturing industry. Complete collapse, no chance of survival. Maybe he's underestimating. I don't know what it looks like. I mean, I'm presuming that whoever was working alongside these people in China are not idiots, and they probably have the means to create some of their own chips. I think it might be a little naive of us to think that they don't have the capacity to do that themselves. But again, I don't know. And, I don't know much about this particular issue. I just caught wind of it. But when people make sensational claims like this is going to be the complete collapse, no chance of survival, it's on par with those people who said that the Chinese economy was going to completely collapse like last month. And of course, absolutely nothing happened. So I think this may well just be a little sensationalized and overblown. But again, I don't know enough about the details. If it is true that that is the case, then indeed, there may be more incentive to attack Taiwan for their chip manufacturing. The problem is, if China does invade Taiwan, the likelihood that Taiwan is just going to forfeit its semiconductor manufacturing facilities without a fight is unlikely. I mean, if anything, the US already has plans to fly all their top engineers out when the attack happens, and they're probably just going to burn the place down. I mean, unless, obviously, the investment into those facilities is massive. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars. So it would be a bold move for them to do that. However, if it's war, then it's war. Then there's a good chance they would just torch the place. So what would be left? So this is why I think it may just incentivize the Chinese to try to take Taiwan back by more diplomatic means, if at all possible, by peaceful means. But I can't see them necessarily just trying to do the place militarily, because that, of course, it's likely that the people who are working in those facilities wouldn't stay working there unless they were forced to at gunpoint, or those facilities would be damaged in some sort of invasion, or they would just be taken out by the Taiwan government themselves to ensure that the Chinese didn't have the capability to do that. And for all we know, that's an arrangement that they have with the US government, is to bring all their top engineers to the US if and when China does invade, so that they can rebuild that all in the US and just start from scratch. So of course, if China doesn't have chips, their ability to maximize their military is going to be limited. But again, I don't know about what this guy's saying. Maybe you guys have more insights with respect to this, whether it's valid or not. I do know that there's a major shortage of Tylenol here in Canada, children's Tylenol to be exact, and it's causing a lot of problems. They're saying that this is due to supply chain issues because there's just more people sick this year, more kids who are getting sick. Surprising, because I guess, the years of wearing masks and preventing their natural immunity, suppressing it, have taken its toll. That's the reason that they're giving. Perhaps it's something else. We also have a situation here with the jet stream. So they are anticipating that we're going to see some wild, wacky weather, that we're going to see really low temperatures in one half the continent, really high temperatures in the other. This happens when the Arctic gets hotter. As the Arctic is heating hotter or faster than the rest of the planet, then the equator, it reduces the heat differential between the Arctic, between the poles and the equator, and that diminishes the strength of the jet stream. So you can see the jet stream here. Typically, it's not that wavy. It's not supposed to be that chaotic. Typically, it's supposed to be more shorter amplitude, but now it's just crazy. So you're getting situations where even up close to Alaska, you're seeing record temperatures. Well, down here in Chicago, this cold front, so anything up top here is cold. This is like the air conditioner of the planet. Anything below here, that's superheated. That's like equatorial heat, the high pressure system. And this is the low pressure system. So I'm not a meteorologist or a weatherman, but all I know is that anything on this side of the jet stream is typically very cold. Anything on this side is very hot. And so right here in the West Coast, you're going to see, right now they're seeing drought, they're seeing heat waves. And then of course right here, they're seeing a cold front all the way down here through the United States. So that's what we have to look forward to. You might get another frozen Texas situation in the not so distant future. In terms of these maps, came across an article that talked about this. I'm familiar with these maps. These maps claim to show where the nuclear targets are going to be if a nuclear war broke out between Russia and the United States. Now, there are a variety of different scenarios that could unfold. We could have a limited first strike situation where Russia just targeted the military targets, which is probably the most likely. If Russia blows their wad, it is going to be mostly on the Minuteman silos, the subs that are at port, the bombers, command and control targets, nuclear storage depots, not on the cities. Okay, you're going to use all your nukes. This is what people need to realize about the current war situation. Everybody's looking at the map like, oh, you know, the Ukrainians are taking land here and the Russians have taken this land here. It has very little to do with the map, because once you destroy the military, the map is yours. So it's not about taking land per se. It's about destroying the other guy's military. In the same way, you know, if you're in a boxing fight, it's not about how much of the ring you control. It's about, you know, how much you're beating the other guy. And the same thing holds true in war. So the objective of a first strike or even a retaliatory strike is going to be to try to take out as much of the command and control structure and the military as possible, including the military that's abroad, and of course plenty of targets within NATO as well, in Europe and a variety of other places around the world, aircraft carriers, the whole nine yards. So a lot of people are very worried about the cities being targets. Civilian targets are going to be secondary. How I've heard it, that it would likely play out, Peter Pry talked about if the Russians and the Chinese were going to attempt to wage nuclear, like a winnable nuclear war, they would first try to take out all of the military targets, and then they would hold the cities hostage. And they would say, if you don't concede, we are going to start nuking your cities one by one. And if the president or whoever else didn't declare defeat, then raise the white flag in defeat, then they would start hitting cities. So it's really all about who has the most nuclear weapons left at the end of the day. And recall, there is no strategic arms reduction treaty between the United States, Russia, and China. So for all we know, China has a lot more nukes than they are letting on. This is the Canadian fallout shelters nuclear map of Cold War fallout shelters. Many of these, of course, are abandoned. A lot of these were just kind of half-assed basements, which were retrofitted to be radiation monitoring stations. But some of them are legit bunkers that are still actually in operation. You can go and check that out. We showed that in a video we did recently. I'm pretty sure that's all I have to discuss with you guys today. Just keep on prepping, because it appears that things are getting worse. And this is likely only the beginning of what is, a lot of people are saying now, is going to be a depression, an economic depression, regardless of how this war plays out. But it looks like in the next couple weeks, Russia is planning something. There's a lot of troop movements in Belarus. Trainloads of guys, vehicles, equipment are flooding in there. And it appears that the Kherson offensive that the Ukrainians are attempting to wage has stalled, at least for now. They got 60,000 guys in that region, supposedly. I don't know what the Russian military presence is like right now. Of course, when you're an offending army, typically you need 3-to-1 advantage. So you need 3 guys for every 1 defender who's dug in. Now, because the Russians haven't been dug in there that long, they may not have had the opportunity to make the extensive fortifications that the Ukrainians had been making for many years in the Donbass area. So they could be, you know, it's anybody's ball game still. I mean, I'm still leaning towards the Russians are going to clean house in the next few weeks. But, you know, if you have the United States starting to send in more mercenaries and more missile defense systems in particular, and just more offensive capabilities, you never know. Things can happen. But right now, it looks like it's Russia's war to lose. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about anything that I talked about today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.